The Australian Government's infrastructure investment and growth programs will lead to more than $125 billion of combined public and private construction activity to grow our economy and support jobs. The Australian Government is making a record $50 billion commitment towards this investment. The Australian Government is delivering on its Economic Action Plan for Australia by fast-tracking up to $2 billion to accelerate construction of Stage 2 of the WestConnex motorway project. This is in addition to our existing $1.5 billion commitment. The Australian Government will be providing the first-ever concessional bridging loan for a major road project. This will enable greater investment from the private sector, with revenue from the project repaying the government's loan and allowing completion of Stage 2 to be brought forward by up to 18 months. The Australian Government's decision on the location of a Western Sydney airport will create the economic transformation of Western Sydney. This will be done in partnership with New South Wales through a new $3.5 billion investment in the road network and by developing another airport for Sydney at Badgerys Creek. NorthConnex will provide a continuous motorway between the Hunter Valley, Central Coast, Western and Southwestern Sydney. This will allow travel from Newcastle to Canberra and Melbourne without traffic lights. In addition to the Australian Government's existing $1.5 billion, we're committing a further $1.5 billion in the East-West Link. This will enable the completion of the full 18-kilometre freeway that will connect the Eastern Freeway at Clifton Hill with the Western Ring Road at Sunshine. It will provide a cross-city alternative to the heavily used Eastern, Monash and Westgate freeways. The Australian Government's $944 million investment will enable the continued upgrade of the North-South Corridor in Adelaide. The Government is providing additional funding to complete the two highest priority sections on the corridor, the South Road upgrade at Darlington and the Torrens Road to River Torrens section. The Australian and West Australian governments will seek to partner with the private sector on the $1.6 billion Perth Freight Link package. The project will provide a high-standard freight connection to the Fremantle port. Together with Gateway WA, Tonkin Highway grade separations and the Swan Valley Bypass, these projects will create substantial network improvements to establish Roe Highway as the preferred east-west freight route. We have committed to deliver the Toowoomba Second Range Crossing, a 42-kilometre road corridor running north of Toowoomba from the Warrego Highway. The Government will support up to 80% of the construction cost, following private sector engagement, including a public-private partnership. The Gateway Motorway North project in Brisbane will see an 11.3-kilometre widening to 6 lanes between Nudgee and Bracken Ridge. In addition to the Australian Government's $70 million investment in Tiger Brennan Drive, we're investing $523 million in the Northern Territory to provide a safer and more reliable road network. The Australian Government's $400 million investment in the Midland Highway will upgrade Tasmania's major transport corridor and a critical freight and transport connection. By the end of the decade, we will have fully duplicated the Pacific Highway between Newcastle and the Queensland border. A completed 4-lane divided Pacific Highway will connect Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane, while in Queensland, a package of 45 new projects along the 1,700-kilometre Bruce Highway will tackle capacity, safety and flooding issues on the highway. Ports are our key economic drivers. It's critical they have productive and efficient rail links. In Sydney, we're upgrading the Port Botany rail line. In Melbourne, we're improving rail and freight links between the Port of Melbourne and metropolitan intermodal terminals. And in Brisbane, we'll investigate a new 24/7 rail freight link to the Port of Brisbane, the country's fastest-growing container port. In Perth, we will shortly complete the North Quay Rail Terminal at Fremantle, which will improve the rail connections between the port and the key freight hub of Kewdale. Through strategic investments, we will build the rail networks we need for the 21st century. Over the next decade, we'll deliver Inland Rail, a new 1,700-kilometre-long dedicated freight corridor between Brisbane and Melbourne. We'll also bring rail into the digital age by supporting the Australian Rail Track Corporation to implement the first stage of its advanced train management system on the existing network. These investments will be a game changer for the way we move freight in Australia. With vital transport and infrastructure projects now underway, the Australian Government is delivering on its commitments. the government is investing in projects that will boost productivity, reduce congestion, and perhaps most importantly, drive economic growth that will help shape the future of Australia.